Hey,
Hey, let's walk through this. Are you using NDI?
hold on. How do I hear myself? Yeah, I'm using NDI. I'm
Okay,
using.
so YouTube and Facebook are picking up whatever the vMix computer is sending out. They're hearing the mic and everything from that because they just heard me. And they're hearing it over stream.
Hold on.
delivering a great product to the far end. And yeah. And there's a ton of people on our Discord who are happy to share knowledge and talk about those things. So, but we all, I mean, I'm always trying to do better. I know, Jeff, you're always bringing it and raising the bar on your own events all the time. So that's what I think we all need to do, is just keep leveling up and keep going. But, cool. So yeah, that was Angela. Sorry, you got your hand up.
Oh, sorry, man. I was going to say how much fun it is, man, to be wearing both hats, man. Like, it's incredible to, like, be the guy out in the room and the guy listening to the mix, because that lets you know you've got your buses set up properly and you can react to the room at the exact same time you're reacting to the broadcast, and no one knows. And that was my flow before pandemic. So the pivot was just coming into a room, into a space where I could just elevate that, to a point of where, like in my room, we don't use any waves or anything. It's all, straight from the desk. So I didn't have a chance to really see Luft's work. But once I figured out how it was working, and I run down to the control room back and forth doing a rehearsal with OBS, and lean, what is that, lean Lufts or something like that they've got out there. Anyways, once I figured that all out and I started hitting it, then I knew I was in the right ballpark. But the pandemic hit, it was coming into a room listening to Jeff and office hours and all these guys. I could just literally blow my head up with that stuff. So I think it's going to work.
And Angela, you said you were in the church is where you're working in a religious space for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, most of the time. And it's like, but then you've got a whole bunch of other guys and gals over across our network that are pretty much doing the same thing, but they've got broadcast rooms.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so the guy that doesn't have a broadcast suite's got to pivot in a different direction.
Are you using a digital board now?
Yeah, I'm using an SD5.
Oh, nice. And Dante on the back side as far as transport, or all analog into?
No Dante. It's all fiber.
I was going to just say a couple of things. One was add a couple of things to Angela's point. If you are one engineer that's doing live audience, because Chris Depot had asked about hybrid strategy, so this is kind of playing into that question. If you're just one engineer, you're doing the PA and you're doing the stream, which we would do for corporate audio. That's standard fare. You'd be lucky if you had another engineer doing just the streaming side. But even if you didn't have that, I would also ask, or they just give me someone who would just listen to that. They wouldn't mix it, but they just go, hey, the stream sounds good, or hey, the stream's a little low or hot or whatever. And that's the thing. If your PA is well-tuned, it doesn't have to be perfectly tuned, it just has to be well-tuned. That means those are your control room monitors. Literally, the PA is your control room monitors. That's the way I was taught. And so if you're making volume adjustments, those are going out to the stream and they're going to the PA at the same time. Now, Ed's point about having all these things separated downstream, yeah, you have to do that. But when you're in the room, when you're in the show, when you're mixing, those sorts of things are going on. You can make slight EQ adjustments we're teaching each other our workflows and tricks, and it's really helped both of these communities enormously.
No, I agree. Absolutely agree with you, Andrew. The main thing that I see as a problem is those that are coming from the presentation space. So those that have been doing those corporate meetings in the ballrooms and such like that, they were at a loss, because those of us that were coming, I've done both, but those of us that are coming from the broadcast side, we understood mixed minuses and the importance of comms. And that was where the presentation guys had no clue. They didn't understand, and they would many times get themselves really deep into problems because they didn't understand how important it was to have that comms to the remote person and having that mixed minus to be able to send to 12 different locations on Zooms. Those were the things that have developed, those workflows. So now it is kind of like those two worlds have got to come together. I would agree with you completely that the broadcast side is filtering into the presentation side, and a little bit more of the presentation side is into the broadcast side. But we've always approached every one of our webcasts was never called a webcast. It was never called a live stream. It's a broadcast. And that sets a level. I feel like it sets a level of expectations that it's like, this is just not a get by live stream. I don't care if it was going to 100 people. It's still a broadcast. So whether or not somebody else is watching it, that's not always my problem. But we're going to do our best to make sure that it's a broadcast of the highest quality.
Yeah, that's true, Jeff. And I always had so much fun after church, taking a long way home, listening to the CD every week. The console session, if it was console 30 session, it morphed to like right up to 60 within a half a year. Just made it to the amazing.
I have to say, I've never done that. That is.
Oh yeah, you gotta do that.
I've gone back and watched a few of the streams just because I wanted to pick up something that maybe we made a mistake or something like that. I want to see why it happened or whatever. Because I do our church pretty much every Sunday that I'm in town, and so that is definitely something I will go back and watch the stream to that, but I will never sit there and watch or listen to the whole thing. I'm a firm believer in not editing and not. We'll review some of our shoots, but once it's live, it's done. It's over with. It's done. I'm moving on. Let's worry about the next thing. I guess that's what I like about live broadcasting the most. Is like once it's done, it's done. You made a mistake. Okay, moving on. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't get to watch, or I don't go back and watch too many of the things. Although I was doing these things for Metro by T-Mobile for UFC, and I would actually go back and rewatch those sometimes, just to see, because in the moment, I feel like it's one thing, but it's kind of double check my work on those.
Also, but you were evaluating it to make sure that you could improve upon it, or
yeah, because I actually walked into those very late. They had been doing them for a while, the company I was working for, and I only ended up doing like the last 3 or 4 of them. And I inherited someone else's scene file when I first started. So the first one afterwards, I was like, man, that was not comfortable to mix on because of someone else's workflow, and it was just not what I was. Some of the routing wasn't the way I would do it. And then they called some audibles for the production team. They wanted different things. They wanted to control. They wanted to be able to, just change a few things on the fly. And it wasn't easy because they were using DCAs, and then I came in and on the next one, I really changed things. I started using groups and boxes differently so that I could have more independent stuff instead of like, they were using a DCA almost like a master view, like kill it, turn it on, and that doesn't allow you to talk between segments to your talent, kind of thing, killing everything to it. So once I was able to change that and made it my own, it was great. So I definitely, the first one I listened to make sure, like, man, I hope I hit everything they wanted to, because I was kind of just feeling it out. But the next one I went back and listened to that was definitely a better broadcast. But also, I sometimes I'll go back and it's something interesting. I'm like, man, I know this is interesting, but I'm really focused on something else. I want to go back and listen to the content. Actually, I never really hear the content that's happening. I'm kind of
unless it was that database. Learning how to program mainframe databases, never ever want to listen that is very common is as we're sharing around, and you guys ran into it today, right? So you walked into that show using somebody else's scene file, and today Omar put on your underwear, and he's running on your preset, right?
Yep.
It drives me crazy too, because I want to build it from scratch, because I want to know where the things are. And I just can't stand wearing somebody else's underwear. That's the way I equate it to. It's like, I want to put on my underwear, and I want to basically make sure they fit just right, so I know where every little piece is, and I want to make sure where I can put all those parts back together if it all falls apart. But that is a big thing that's in that vMix workflow that drives me insane, is it doesn't have that this is an input, this is where it is, this is the outputs. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. There's just so many ways that you can build a look, and it's more about those looks. Whereas in our TriCaster or our BizVector file formats, the ways those work is the inputs are always in the same place. The DDRs are always in the same place. I know where to find it, and I just find it's a lot more fluid to drop an operator down in front of it and say, hey, here it is, go to town, run it. Because you're not going to have it hidden somewhere else.
Absolutely. It's even the same thing though, like E2 operators. I mean, I've done tons of E2 shows, and maybe halfway through the pandemic, maybe 6-8 months ago, I did an E2 show where I was coming in to set up a show for someone else to operate the next day, because they were operating a show in the studio on the setup day. And it's somebody I know, we're friends, so I said, hey, how do you want me to set up your E2? So he kind of gave me the run of it. But when I walked in, it wasn't an E2, it was an S3. And it didn't have enough layers to do the show. So I did this whole rehearsal and built it in a way that was as close to what we could, pull together. And then S3, and it was just set up how I figured out how to set it up. He would have walked into a mess. I mean, he got to rebuild it himself. He got to, pick out his own underwear. He wasn't wearing stinky underwear from the day before. That wasn't going to work. So even with hardware, you can get in those situations because of the flexibility. Flexibility breeds complexity. So if the more flexible your piece of gear is, the complex it's going to be. And operator A is going to set it up way different than operator B. It is. Now, like Justin, you're a freelance guy, and I'm sure you're not with your own stuff. So, I mean, how often have you ever walked into a gig where somebody else set it up for you, or you didn't get the pick of you, and it's now you're kind of having to figure it out on site? I'm sure that happens to you.
It's been a few times. Oh yeah, a few times.
And what do you do in those situations? How do you handle it?
Tuck, roll, and adapt. If I don't know something, I look it up on my phone, Google it, but I mean, it's all worked out for me in the past, so I usually figure stuff out pretty quick.
Yeah, because you don't always have the time to rebuild. It'd be beautiful if we always did, but we definitely don't. Iris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, believe it or not, it's happened to us too, where sometimes we have freelancers come in and they do all their setup, everything they want, and then something happens and they're stuck in traffic or something, and you have to start their show and you haven't even had any time with whatever they set up, even though you own the gear, or it was rented, you don't know what you're walking into either. And you're waiting a prayer.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, you could be the in-house, and there could be outside AD that came in and did something. And if it's been, what gets me is the stuff that sometimes is unconventional. Just one person will have some kind of thing that they do that's their way of doing it. Thinking in like the concert world, most people start kick drum, snare drum, drums first, but then there's sometimes there'll be that one person who's like, oh no, my drums start at channel 24, and you're like, this is completely backwards to how anybody else does it.
We all go left to right, and one odd person goes right to left.
Right, exactly. Andy, you have something to add?
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's more forgivable in live music and, to have it your own way. But in the corporate world, broadcast world, I'm a firm believer in I might get hit by a bus syndrome, which is someone may have to sit behind my console. So I'm not going to name, like, the first RF channel, the name of the person. I'm going to just name an RF1. That way, Ed, if you had to take over, you'd know, okay, that's the first wireless input, wireless mic input. I don't need to know this person's name who I've never encountered before. So things like that. I took over a mix from Brian Maddox, great engineer. The input side was just how I would do it, or he did it for if someone had to take over. Some of the output and monitoring was more him, and I just talked to him, at one point and go, hey, what if we do it this way? And this was a mix that you took over, Ed. This was for what ultimately became Madeline's Kitchen. And he's like, yeah, let's just do it that way. I'm like, great, so it wouldn't be this confusing mess of someone walking in and having to put on. It was more generic underwear, to use that terminology.
Yeah, I'm liking the underwear analogy here. And to that exact gig that you're talking about, Andrew, where I did take over, one of the things that was interesting is you were on site, and then I came in and I mixed part of the show for both. And I was using the monitor bus to listen to, but you were monitoring things in the room using your monitor bus. So before I took over for you, I'm listening to it, and all of a sudden I'm hearing level changes and solos and things happening, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And it's totally the same thing. I had to just adopt what you were using because we were both splitting duties that day. And then once you handed it over to me, then I set my levels I wanted to, but I had to be mindful that we were both working on the same desk at the same time, essentially, on the same show, and then it had to get handed back to you. So it wasn't like I was going to go changing anything. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. But so to mix two analogies, though, the hit by the bus, I use that all the time. I tell my clients all the time, I over-label things, and I try to leave notes, and I say it's the hit by the bus. Like, if I get hit by a bus, you want to make sure somebody can walk in and do it. And then the underwear that Jeff was brought up, it's like your mom, when you were a kid, used to tell you, make sure you wear clean underwear in case you get hit by a bus. So, having your own clean underwear.
It's a circle, man. It's a circle. It all ties together.
It's all connected.
Exactly. So those are great things to consider. Bodie, you got your hand up. What's up?
Yeah, I got like what you guys are saying about. I've got two instances where one of them was a client was like, oh, we're gonna send you all the information, load it up in the vMix, get all the overlays set up. They did all of the lower thirds, everything, right? And the client was like, okay, they loaded it on their end in vMix. I said, okay, if you're going to load it in vMix and you're going to send me a pre-done file, take out the audio, take out all the other stuff, like the captures and everything, and when I get on site, we'll reattach them because none of them's going to line up. They're like, oh, okay, no problem. They sent me the file, and it wasn't even, they had, like, way too many audio files for, like, I'm like, you have one mic and there's 12 mic inputs. And it's like, okay, whatever. Took it down, started stripping it, and then none of the overlays were set right, none of the lower thirds, the font matched, nothing matched, and it was like, alright guys, listen, send me the files for all of your overlays that you want. I'll do them in the title editor to make sure we have the fonts and everything that we have. I can get the exact colors you need because I can customize them in the title editor and everything like that. And it was like, they're like, oh no, it should be fine. I'm like, guys, and I pulled up the first overlay, the lower third for them, and it was like this big, and none of the font matched, nothing matched with it, and it was like this weird script writing where it was like squares and circles. I'm like, guys, vMix doesn't have that. So wherever you did the font style for it, it's not in vMix for that. If you can send me the font and I can load it in vMix, it's good. They're like, oh, well, we didn't load the font. That's what our graphics design guy did. And I'm like, card, and then they had another overlay coming for their PowerPoint, and it didn't match. The overlay for their speaker was 16 by 9, but the overlay with the PowerPoint was 4.3 on both sides, or 4.3 on both sides. The PowerPoint one doesn't look right. I said, because it's 4.3, not 16 by 9. So you're going to have to crop it down in order to fit in. Oh, well, that shrinks everything or it cuts stuff off. And I'm like, I said 16. Any names to it or anything like that, but yeah, to me it just makes it easier. Something I go, oh, okay, there's my mic 1, there's my mic 2, there's my mic 3. This is where things are going.
Yeah, no, great points. To Andy's point, sometimes usually that's what I'll do is RF1 and then maybe put the person's name, especially on those panels where they decide they're all going to be on handhelds, but they're not going to sit in the right order of your mics left to right. So then I'll usually label at least on the console the name, so it's like, oh, John, I have a question for you, and then I know where John is. I don't have to know what mic you grabbed or anything.
Same here. I'll put the name in, and boy, does Duke can help you out on that too, because you can just roll the fade or something and go, okay, now I know where everybody is.
Yeah, I mean, when I say I over-label too, I mean, usually as the A1 on the job, you get a lot of, you might get stagehands, you might get guys who are really, or people who are really great techs, or you might get, box pushers who got elevated to tech that day because that's who showed up. So, I've gotten in the habit of when it's time to lay out cable, especially when we're using racks and stacks for PA, I will go, and before they get to do anything, I'll tell them where to lay out the speakers, and before they run the cable, I will go out there with some white gap and a Sharpie, and I will label both ends of my NL4s and have them run them so that when something is backwards or in the wrong place or wrong amp channel, I can go over and quickly find it. It's in my handwriting. It's what, the zone I told them to put it to and all things like that. So I really over-label it. I have clients sometimes who are like, do you really need to label every cable? And I'm like, well, I don't, but when we have a problem, I can get it back much faster if I know what's what, or I can spend time tracing a cable and we'll have more downtime. So you can tell me where you want me to spend my time. Do you want me to spend my time troubleshooting in the middle of the show when something's going wrong? Or do you want me to take a few minutes to label some cables so that the guys who are helping us, who aren't necessarily audio people or who don't really care because they're on a 5-hour mini and then they're out of here, then, there's a whole thing to it. So again, the hit by a bus too. If I got hit by a bus overnight, between set day and show day, some other audio tech can come in and say, oh, I see where everything's labeled. I get, okay, oh, that's that zone, that's this, that's that, blah, blah, blah. So, all this bus talk, exactly, Justin. It's funny. Now, great, now I'm getting hit by a bus. That's really what's happening here. I'm just jinxing myself like crazy.
Well, the worst part is when you traveled on a tour bus. Then it really got to be real. Because you could either fall off the bus or get ran over by the bus if you weren't paying attention. So you got to keep all those things in mind, Justin. It could be bad. It could be.
Yeah. Well, and what's the one rule about sleeping on a tour bus?
Feet first, always.
Always. Feet first, always. Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
That's actually not the number one rule. The number one rule is...
There's no number 2 in the bathroom.
Number 2.
That's
number 2.
Number 1 rule.
So you skip those, and then number 2, or maybe 3, would probably be feet first. Yeah.
Feet first, always, yeah.
The number 2 is not just the tour bus.
we can
to take the top bunk. The second time anyone goes on a tour bus, they want to take the bottom bunk. So that's...
Yeah, it only takes falling off one time. That's it. That's all it takes.
That was true for cruise ships too. Same thing. One rough trip and you didn't want the hot bunk anymore.
Yeah, I've never been a cruise ship, thankfully. Angelo, looked like you had your hand up.
I was going to say, so a lot of the corporate narratives that we've all come to know and make better, it seems like I brought that into my church actually, and then I'm standing by for whoever's going to be the visiting tech, just to see if you have one. So, I mean, people who represent venues and take care of venues, I think you always want to think about if your console is used or your stage is being used by someone else, right? I think you guys all ran into that.
Oh, yeah. I work at a facility that's a performing arts center, and, our consoles are set up. Justin Herminghouse, who's normally on our panel, who's often on our panel, he runs that facility, and the way that the consoles are set up is basically for incoming visiting engineers, so that they can have pretty much any options they want. So, like for our subs in every room, for example, we have the ability that we can run subs on and off. That's a common rider ask. But we also have it set by default. It's actually set for just coming off of left, right, and then being split by a crossover, and that's the kind of standard way. But a couple button presses, and then we're reconfigured for aux-fed subs. Also, in like our main theater, we just had one of the theaters redone a couple of years ago. We voiced that PA to be flat, so we had to make the choice: did we want to voice it so that it had a little bit of a low end bump, and so that it sounded good for the room, or did we want to have ruler flat for the room so that it was a clean canvas, basically for any visiting engineer? And Justin's, not speak for him, but the kind of thought process was, let's go flat, and that gives anybody walking in the ability to shape the sound how they want. So there's things when you have a house that's like a roadhouse and other people are coming into it, that you think about setting up for any situation, so you're versatile. Yeah, like you were saying, Andrew, I think that's a great way to work if you're on the venue operations side. I'd love to, Chris asked this question earlier, I'd love to talk about hybrid strategies. So he's saying, I'd like to hear about any hybrid strategies. So moving forward, we all talked about how we're seeing, earlier we talked about how we're kind of seeing work starting to come back, and events are starting to happen nationwide, pretty much, and I guess in Canada too. So what are some of the things we're thinking about for hybrid specific events where we are going to have live in-person audience, we're going to be sending out to the web, but we're also maybe taking in remote callers, and how do we deal with interaction between those two audiences and our presenters, maybe working or coming in remotely? Is anybody dealing with those yet? I mean, yeah, Jeff, obviously, I know you have been for a long time. So yeah, share with us some thoughts there, and then we'll see how everybody else is kind of thinking about approaching that stuff.
Well, first off, I want to mention that in 13 days, there's going to be this summit thing coming up that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking a solid hour on this with a couple very special friends, and we're going to bridge this subject altogether very deeply. So definitely sign up for the summit, and we hope to see you there. Bring your questions, because we'll be doing questions and answers also through it. We've got a lot of great material we're already working on. Just kind of a tease for it right now. I feel like, personally myself, that there's other people in the industry that are very strong about not having hybrid. I feel like if you can do hybrid right, it has a place. And so when I say do it right, that means you are going to split some of the attention. That's just inevitable. But your speakers can be trained, your talent can be trained, but you're going to have to basically build content for both sides. And I kind of see the hybrids for the near future to be more of a small VIP type of group in the space. and then the majority of people that are consuming the content is going to be out of the space, and that would be the people that are just watching online, watching via whatever medium you happen to be sending to. It might be a web stream, it might be a Zoom or something like this that's more of a gallery view type of interaction. But that is definitely happening right now. And the biggest problem is when people now are like, oh, we're back in person. Oh, we just got that web stream for those other people up there. That's going to be the biggest mistake. And then they'll say, oh, well, the hybrid didn't work. It was like, well, you didn't put any effort into it. So you didn't think about, how do I get question and answers from those people? How do I bring those people to make them feel like they're part of the group on site? It could be done. I spoke with a gentleman a few weeks ago. We're still working on details and stuff about doing this, and it was a large travel event, so we're working out numbers now. But they wanted to have about 40 to 50 people on site, and then could be hundreds that were off site, and they wanted 5 different tracks, 5 different rooms, so breakouts effectively that are broken up, and they wanted to be able to talk to those people in each one of those rooms. So you can just imagine how complex it is. We're doing it here, but that's going to be really complex to be doing it times 5 and taking those people in, and they want to do some host, so they want to have some talent to the room. So they're going to put I think it was going to be LED walls. It's going to be just projection screens, but they would have those in each room. So some of the hosts for the local people, the people on site, were actually going to be from off site. So that's a whole other twist on things too. And I think that's the kind of things that we have to think about and plan ahead for. But now I believe that hybrid will work if it's done right. But you do have to put a lot of effort into it to make sure simple things like mixed minuses are taken care of, to make sure that things like confidence video is taken care of in a timely manner, that it's not delayed so much that that you can't have a conversation. Because we're all used to this now. This is second nature. We're sitting here having a conversation with people all over the country and in another country, and I think that's where we're definitely going to have to move forward to expect that kind of interaction within the sites.
Yeah, I agree. Again, flexibility breeds complexity. So to be able to be flexible in these so that nobody feels left out is going to very much take a lot of thoughts and tons of technology and forethought and how that's all going to work out. And Chris, you have something?
Yeah, the perfect point of what Jeff was talking about. I did a hybrid event for Foundation, and they had people obviously live. They had artists live. They had a panelist discussion live, and one of the panelists wasn't able to make it. Sorry guys, I forgot to put that on. It's my fault. One of the panelists wasn't able to make it, so last minute they're like, "Hey, can you get this in for us so we can see him live and send it out as well?" No problem. VMix call, send him the link. We got it, right? Everything's good. They completely forgot about the guy on the VMix call. Like, didn't even acknowledge him. Nothing. So the guy, after like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of sitting there, was like, "Listen, it sounds like they're taking shape on the conversation. I'm just gonna go." And then the guy got upset. The client got upset because he was like, "Oh, well, why didn't you do this?" Or "What?" "Well, we did. We told you he was there. We had it set up for you. He was waiting for you to introduce him to bring him in." And then they got upset at us about the numbers for the stream. And I'm like, "Whoa, that's not on our part. We didn't do advertising or marketing for you. We were just doing the stream. We sent the stream out. You didn't advertise it properly to say, hey, we're also doing it here as well, and you could pick it up there." And he wasn't, and granted, he was charging because it was a charity event that they were doing, but it was $4 to get to see the stream, but so yeah, exactly. Jeff's laughing, but yeah, exactly. It was nothing to see what was going on, and you could have easily marketed that and got it a ton of people there for $4. And they had live concert going on, live DJ going on. You got to see all the artists and what they brought in, live artist interviews. It was a really cool thing they were doing, but it was just very ill prepared. So when you're talking about like being prepared for your virtual events, that's one of the other things you got to think about is you don't forget about your virtual side, like you're saying, is if you're going to have a virtual side, make sure you market and push that virtual side out as well for it to work. Because if you're expecting big numbers on the virtual side and you put no effort into marketing that virtual side, it does you no good.
No, great points. Great points like this. Anybody else have any thoughts on how they're going to approach hybrid, or have you been asked to do anything hybrid? And are you seeing some of like the same old, or are we seeing any new innovative? I know Jeff probably can talk about some of the new innovative things. And for him, they're not so innovative because we've been doing it for so long. It's just a regular day in the office. But for any of us that are like maybe freelancers or just kind of getting back into the swing of things, are we looking at anything interesting, or anybody have any ideas of how hybrid is going to look?
Keep your eye open for AR. AR is going to be more and more in use. It's becoming easy, and as it's becoming easy, it means it's going to get used more. If anything, it might get used too much at first. People not knowing how to use it the right way, just like virtual sets did about 10 years ago. It was just like everything had to be a virtual set. Everybody was painting their rooms green. But you can still use green screen AR stuff too. But I think with the LED and the extended reality, so really not just AR, it's really XR. So extended reality type sets, I feel like that's the future. I really do. I feel like that done right, you can build a much bigger world in a much smaller space.
So I was going to ask you before you corrected there, because AR would be great for the virtual audience, but then you have to do the XR with LED or something for the in-room audience if you want those experiences to match.
Well, that's the whole thing is now we can, right? Before XR didn't make sense for a situation where you might have a mixed audience. So a hybrid would never work without XR and LEDs. If you're doing a green screen, they could watch the screen off to the side that was a proof of what it was actually looking at for the broadcast, but you were completely disconnected. But whenever you're using XR with LED screens, you're literally in that space. It's just that connection that we all crave. And the more times you can make that feel real, then it looks real because it feels real, and it looks real because So you gotta have to have some kind of interaction between the content, and whenever you're just talking to the wall, it's not quite as the same. I mean, I talk to the wall all the time. It never listens, but I do talk to them.
Now, what's interesting though about that point is XR. I mean, it looks great on camera, but that's done with a lot of camera tracking, and that's for that point in space. That oval. For example, when I did some of my disguise training a number of years ago, they showed us. I think it was the Katy Perry Super Bowl halftime show from a couple years before I took the training, and they showed us what the disguise file looked like, and we were able to see it through the 3D visualizer, and even the camera cuts were programmed in D3. And we watched it alongside with a clip of the actual broadcast to see how everything tracked. Then we watched it a second time where we pulled the camera back in 3D visualizer, so we were looking at like the blimp side view, and all of the projections looked like totally wonky if you weren't in that camera focal. So I think even XR, though, with any sort of live audience, you have to keep that in mind that it's going to look kind of weird to that audience. And of course, if you think about the Super Bowl, there might be 60,000 fans in the seats, but there's how many millions of people watching. So that was a digital first event, a broadcast event, because that's where your larger audience is. And that's kind of like when people talk about some people say it's not going to ever work. When you think about things like the Super Bowl, where you do have an audience that attends and you have a home audience, those are two different experiences, but the home audience doesn't feel cheated in any way. Oftentimes they feel better because they've got many more camera angles, much closer to the action. Or if you think about every Monday night, there's wrestling on some channel, there's Monday Night Raw, or there's WWE like a couple nights a week, and those arenas are packed and people tune in. I mean, it's still real for them, and they love it. And I don't think any of those will feel cheated of the experience either way. So I think hybrid absolutely can work. I think it's those things though that you can't just forget about one audience or let them take a back seat like we did, I think, very often pre-pandemic. Is you can't just throw a camera in the back of the room and say, here's the event, have fun. Because even the in-person events, when you're throwing a camera in the back of the room, a lot of times they were born to be there. So I think we all just have to really kick up our game overall. Angela, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I guess just the AR the way I understand it. How's immersive going to play into that when I'm sitting in my living room and I'm just John and Jane Doe? Do I go out to Best Buy and get a rig?
Well, that technology is becoming more and more affordable, and simpler. So you could have wireless rear speakers. You could have the Atmos where it's just coming off of a sound bar. So as that technology trickles down, it's just going to be that much more affordable for you to do that and experience the same thing. I personally don't have an Atmos. My receiver is Atmos compatible, but if I started punching more holes in my living room, I would have to find somewhere else to live. So I can't. But I would love to have it for those few times I need it. But let's be truthful about that too. And whether it's HDR or Atmos, I'm a firm believer is broadcast to the masses and try to find that median broadcast quality, right? So you're high quality, but you don't need to necessarily be all the way up here just because the technology exists. You need to find the sweet spot. You may not want to do 480p, but you want to do something better than 720p to 1080p now is kind of an even thing. But I'm not going to cater to an HDR fan base just because. I do live on the
I
edge.
feel you on that big time, Jeff, especially with Twitch streaming.
What's the point? If 6 people can watch it, why am I going to put all this effort out for those 6 people?
Right, but the beauty about something like Atmos is it will fold down to the people who can't, it will fold down to the lowest common, to meet their needs. So something like that could be a great thing for the future to start working towards, because it's not going to diminish the viewing experience of people who don't have a full Atmos setup.
And I could see Atmos in sports. I could see immersive audio in sports. I see immersive audio in a lot of just movies, of course, right? That's a given. But immersive audio in a keynote, I'm struggling. I am struggling to understand, why do I need to even think about it, right?
What, I mean, you don't want to hear the slapback from the wall in the convention hall?
Well, I guess if you are going to make it real, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
But the thing too, Jeff, to think about is some events are going immersive audio in live event as well, with things like D&B sound or DB Soundscape or L Acoustics Lisa systems. As you start seeing those happening out in the wilds, in the fields, and at the live events, it would be great if your broadcast matched those sorts of experiences. So, I think it's gonna be relative. So as you see more of the immersive audio in the live event space, then if you're really going to do a hybrid event right, you need to recreate that at least for your virtual audience as well. So I don't think we're that far off. I mean, to be honest, immersive audio is, you'd be amazed to know how much immersive audio.
How are you going to use it in a keynote address?
No. In a corporate keynote, no. You're absolutely right. No.
Or
right
a
time, right
panelist
place.
sitting on the front of it. Where is that ever going to be part of it?
100%. No, and that's what I'm saying. But the events that are using immersive audio, for example, like art installation pieces or something, where that's what, but you're also going to unveil that to a home audience, or or debut it, or there's some more concerts.
So we're talking entertainment at this point. So you're talking more entertainment than anything.
Right.
And as I said, I can see it in sports because you can do, and I've actually been trying to do this for years. I just get tired of working at it and not getting any anything out of it because it's like, why put out 5 microphones? So our normal tennis spec is 2 microphones because the camera is for it was 3 microphones. It's the one on the chair and then a left and right for the back for the baseline, and the ball's coming at you. The camera, the main view is that baseline camera. So the audio's coming at you, the ball's coming at you. If the ball is over there and they hit it, it should sound less than what it is over here. The ATP spec is like 9 microphones, and there's no real reason why. They never explained, and I've asked. There's no engineer that says, well, this is the reason why we have 2 here, 2 there, 2 over here, 3 around the chair. Okay, those I understand because you're trying to get the chair on the umpire and also to the player on either side. But the ones on the other side of the baseline, they have literally hardly any use at all. And so they're like, well, it just makes it sound like you're there more. Like, but your point of view, and that's how I try to mix. Your point of view is what is in front of you, right? And you rarely ever want to break the line. You don't want to flip around and try to break the plane and go from the other side. So those microphones, to me, are relatively useless. And of course, the spec is 4/16s and certain levels that we have to keep. But that's kind of my point is with the whole surround. If you did it right, yes. If you had a point of view where you want to hear fans behind you, that's one thing. But if it's something that's focused on a pitch or on a court or a field that is all right there in front of you, I'm finding it hard to justify the cost of something for a panel or a keynote type approach in a corporate view. I just don't see it.
No, and I agree with you. In a corporate view, if you're just doing a talking heads kind of thing, no, I fully agree that would be way overkill for that sort of thing. But now you could reimagine your event, especially if you go for a digital first. You could maybe do something that's in the round as opposed to just being, and maybe your camera, you have a semicircle of your presenters and your camera is in the center fan tilting and going around. That could be a sort of thing. And if you're looking at presenter number 6 and then presenter number 2 has a comment, you want to hear that maybe over your back left shoulder and however it's going to be. But yeah, for the typical talking head, no, I don't. I 100% agree with you, Jeff. And even what you're saying, if you're doing a 3-camera shoot on a tennis match, then maybe it doesn't necessarily make sense to have all that other stuff unless you're capturing ambient and that's all you're throwing in your rear speaker or something like that. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Yes, use what you need to capture the effect you're going for, and you don't have to throw the kitchen sink at it. Yeah, again, talking heads, I wouldn't do that. Angela, did you have
I was just gonna say that with everything that's coming down the pipe, you have to rehearse with our talking head guy moving around the room in order to get him immersed. Moving around the stage.
Right, that would be more rehearsal time to actually make sure that we have that set up. I mean, with the tracking that they do, the real-time tracking, things like it's not as crazy. You can get away with a lot because you can do some tracking of movement, especially with like these immersive audio, like I mentioned before, the DB product, the Soundscape, and Elisa Meyer has one now. They all work with some sort of either black tracks or some kind of tracking software so that you can move a live object in your sound field. But that's definitely more rehearsal time to make sure the tech works, because the worst thing you can have is not having your tech work properly on the day you're trying to do it. So, case in point today. Iris, what's something to say? And then Andy afterwards.
I was just going to say that some of this and the way things can be going kind of remind me of the old TV show Max Headroom.
Absolutely. Max Headroom.
People I think are old enough to remember Max Headroom.
Absolutely. Andy, you got something?
Yeah, we had some echo from Iris there. Yeah, I was just thinking about like the corporate side. Like, what are you gonna do? You know, if someone's moving around the stage. If you're in the room, right? You're in a ballroom. Someone's moving around the stage. Their voice isn't moving. That would be distracting. You know, no one's gonna pan left and right or whatever. And you know, at home, same thing. I could maybe see if there's a large panel on stage, maybe do a little panning. It might be a little easier to take people's voices out, but I wouldn't do it in an extreme way. Again, that would be distracting. And I think Jeff's point too is that, you know, with this, and also with sports, you know, where like baseball, where the majority of the shot is behind, you know, behind the pitcher, you know, the center field camera. I mean, I think it's on like what, 98% of the time or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. You know, that the audio orientation isn't going to change. So those are things to keep in mind. You know, I think there's a lot of value in mono still, even though we've come a long way with stereo and surround and now immersive. But you know, there's a place for mono, even despite how complicated your audio system is going to get. But it is interesting that L Acoustics, they were the ones who invented the line array speaker format. They had the original patent on that. They are now marketing home stereo speaker systems for immersive that are supposed to imitate what their immersive version is. I think it's the name of it, ISIS or ESIS or something like that. Does out of
That's the Elisa.
Well, Elisa, thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, just the fact that they're getting into that space is interesting. Bose did a similar thing a long time ago. They were known as a live sound speaker company, and then they started making home stereo speakers. And they were trading on at that time, they were trading on their name. Very different.
That's exactly what L Acoustics is doing right now, too. But just nobody knows their name.
Exactly.
Except for us.
Exactly. No one knows their name. Like, who are these people? And, you know, those systems do not look cheap. And, again, to Jeff's point, you know, the 5 people that are going to benefit from that mix, you know, so anyway.
I mean, you guys are talking audio. It's the same thing with video. With the new 3090 graphics cards and things like that, you're able to 4K better on them. And Twitch, about I want to say 6 or 7 months ago, put out a thing where you can now have 4K transcoding on stream. And a couple of people have been like, "Hey, are you gonna jump on that?" You know, they know I'm into all this tech crap, and I'm like, "No." They're like, "Well, why not?" I'm like, "What, for the one person that might be able to watch it? 4K monitors are $800 or $600, or you know, it's not cheap to have. And then even the bandwidth or anything to even see that is ridiculous in itself. So it goes the same thing with video, where people are like, you know, yeah, 4K TVs have gotten a lot cheaper. Obviously, you can get a 55-inch Roku TV for $230, $250 sometimes, you know, and then even with the new 8K stuff that's coming out, people are like, oh, and I'm like, guys, you're jumping on a train, you know, 8K TVs, $4,000. You're jumping on a train that's not even here yet. You know, it's just not feasible when it comes to it. And like I said, even with the streaming at the 4K, like me personally, only because I don't have the transcoding available on Twitch, but even 1080p streaming on Twitch limits your audience, because if you're trying to have somebody on mobile watch, they're not going to be able to pick up more than your 720 anyway. So like that sweet spot that I see a lot of people going to is that like 936 or 960p. That a lot of people are going to for like the medium between that high definition and the to be right above 720 and right below that high definition, so they can reach that broader audience. But it's just not. It's the same thing everywhere. When you're doing hybrid events, you know, some of the platforms don't. Now 24, I think it's called, or on 24 or something. It doesn't play nice with 1080. It just doesn't. 1080p, it gets very grainy. And we've had a couple other people look at the settings themselves and they say the same thing. Now, unless it's something I'm missing with On24, I'm not sure. I haven't really played with it too much because I only have one person, one client that wants to stream to On24. Everybody else does it through Zoom, and we have 1080p Zoom accounts and things like that, or they do it through Vimeo, which is 1080p and things like that. But all these people that are crying, especially on the gaming end, where it's like, oh well, we want to see 4K. No, you don't, because you can't even. You don't even have what it takes to even see it.
Well, the same thing is like I was saying. It's like HDR, 4K, whichever flavor of 4K you want. HDR, and what are most of the people consuming on? That. So, at what point does this really? Does it really need 4K? Can it even handle it? I'd love to see everything on my Apple TV. I'd love to see everything on my. But let's just face it, it's a pain in the butt to get to that.
Yeah, so sometimes you just have to play to, like you mentioned earlier, Jeff, play to what your audience is actually gonna be. Very often, I recommend people who are doing Facebook streaming. I say, why are you gonna send a 1080p 60 signal? Or I'll hear people complain, why I send these 1080p signals, but it gets knocked down to 720. And I'm like, yeah, well, if you're not using something like vMix and the API and taking advantage of that, then that's the max you're going to get anyway. So why not just send it out at 720? You could do your record at 1080, but have your encoder do 720 and not throw away all that extra data and waste all that extra bandwidth, because that's what people are going to consume it at. Now, of course, we're fortunate because of the support of the DVE store, that we're able to send 1080p out everywhere, including this Zoom webinar. Tonight might not be hitting 1080 on Facebook, we're not sure, because tonight we're having some technical difficulties. But on a typical day, we're sending in 1080p to Facebook and to YouTube, and that's because of our support with the DVE store and the way we're using our technology to make that happen. But not everybody has that, and not everybody can consume that. So sometimes it doesn't make sense, but when you are capable, again, if we weren't able to, we would still be recording in 1080p, and then before we were using vMix, we were sending it at 360p everywhere, because we were streaming either from. Well, actually, I guess we were doing OBS before. So when we did OBS, we were only doing 720p. That's right. For a while, when we did OBS, that's how the show was going out, 720, because that's what made sense. It didn't make sense for me to send a 1080p. I would record a 1080p, but I wouldn't send it out from the encoder that way. And then when we used to stream from Zoom, it looked terrible. I think we were getting 360p because of the webinar, so it was awful. So we've been very thankful. Again, thanks to the DVE store. That's dvestore.com for their support in helping us get that 1080p so that we can deliver better content. Jeff, you got something?
Just if you didn't know, just in case you didn't know, everything that is broadcast on that little station called ESPN, 720p. That's not bad, guys. But people that are in this space, like, oh no, we're not going to do 720p. It's honestly, if you've got the right signal flow and you've got the right gear, it can look gorgeous. But what does ESPN know?
Yeah, I think it's hilarious, Jeff, that you bring that up, because I've gotten into full-on arguments with people. It's like, I went and got this TV to watch this program on for ESPN. I'm like, you do realize it's only 720p. You didn't need to upgrade. What do you mean? No, you don't understand. It only comes out 720p. No, you're wrong. All right, listen. I know people who work in the industry that do this stuff for a living, and I've seen what their setups are. It is only 720p, but go ahead and spend at that time $1,200 to $1,500 on a 42-inch 4K TV for no reason whatsoever. It's like...
Now, Jeff, though, when the local cable company gets it, they might send it at 1080i, right? It gets rescaled.
Actually, no, it's supposed to be 720p.
Supposed to still go 720.
Yeah.
I'm not a sports guy, so I don't watch enough ESPN to have ever.
Now, ABC is 1080i. ABC is 1080i. Tennis Channel is 1080i, which kills me for when we broadcast on, because we are working at a minimum of 1080p, but a lot of our workflow is actually 4K. So that was a contractual thing, though. That was my client coming to us saying, we want you to produce a 4K. This is what we, in order to do this contract, this is what it needs to be. So we built our workflow around 4K. But in the end, we're going even way less than that because it's going to the gaming companies overseas. But that was just something that we had to deal with because it was contractual at that point. But if I had my druthers, 1080p is where I would be. But why do 1080p production if your final product's going to be 720p? I would rather dumb my cameras back down, dumb them down, but I'll turn the cameras to match my flow. And so the switchers at 720p, the routers at 720, everybody's at 720p. There's none of this having to scale up or down, and then we send it out like that. Unfortunately, we would do the same thing for 1080i. So if we're primarily going to Tennis Channel or overseas to ATP Media, the same thing, doing 1080i because that's what they want. They don't even get me started about 50 and 60 because that's a whole other fight.
Hey Jeff, it's audio guy asking a video question, but I thought I had heard something about how sports and action look better in 720p versus 1080i.
Correct.
Is that right?
The bandwidth is the same between the two, but because it's progressive, fast motion is going to look better as progressive. So that's the reason why 720p is going to look better than 1080i in fast motion. So that's why my feelings about Tennis Channel being 1080i, but they're a Sinclair station. It's the workflow. It is what it is. But there's a lot of people that bought into that. Oh, well, 1080, that's more numbers than 720. But it's not actually. 1080p
More better.
is, but not 1080i. 1080i is exactly the same bandwidth. I mean, within just a small little piece of 720p. So yeah, progressive is where it's all at for sports.
Right. And that's what, I was going to say, the progressive is the thing. That interlacing of lines is what makes the fast motion look bad when you have to do an interlaced format. Even when I used to do, again, like I used to do a lot of those webcasts where it really was just kind of a camera in the back of the room, and maybe we had an operator on a spider pod, but I would often get that complaint, oh, how come when the camera pans this way are we seeing these lines on the streams of the far end? It's like, well, your switcher here is a Panasonic 410, and that's a 1080i switcher. It's not a 3G switcher, so I can't do 1080p 60. What does that mean? Well, that means you're going to see some lines unless I do something different. And then in that case, yeah, I would go to 720p if that was the option. But a lot of times, oh, well, no, it has to be 1080. And then you have to deal with some lines. That's going to be.
Either that or never move the camera. One or the other. Take your choice.
Yeah. That's always an option too.
Well, it's funny because sometimes people just have the argument of P versus I, which has been going on for a while, even before 4K and some of the other stuff. And that was an ongoing argument for broadcasting for some time.
Yeah. So I sadly have to jump off. I'm not in my normal place. I'm in Michigan visiting some family, and I've been beckoned to go watch some fireworks. So I need to jump. But thank you all. Chris is going to take over leading the discussion for the rest of the evening. But I just want to take a minute to thank Justin and Angelo, Andrew, Iris, Jeff, as always, and John Edelson, who kind of joined us a little late. I don't think we've heard from yet today. But thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody who's been watching. It's been a year of AV Tech Talks. I'm super excited. It's been great. We kind of started this thing not realizing what it would turn into or where it would go. And we appreciate everybody who joins us every week and joins the conversations. And please join our Discord. We put sort out all the issues that we're having tonight. We'll be back to normal. We'll have clean underwear on, and everything will work unless I get hit by a bus. So again, I thank you, everybody. I'm gonna sign out. Bodie, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Have a good night, man. Enjoy yourself.
Good night, everyone.
And don't forget to drop the fireworks before they go off.
Yeah, we don't need no Jason Pierre-Paul situation going on over there. We need all 10 fingers and toes when you come back.
And don't let the bus run over the fireworks.
Yeah, I'm just watching. I have no control. Now, Justin Herminghouse, I'll tell you guys, you know why he's not here tonight is because
He's running it.
he was running the Las Vegas fireworks. So he's essentially the go, no, go button is under his finger, essentially, is from what I understand about his role there. It's very interesting. He's done fireworks shows in Dubai and all over the place. 4th of July fireworks and New Year's Eve in Vegas are two of the gigs he does pretty much annually. So he couldn't join. I think he's on the plane back because he did it yesterday. But yeah, no, that's not my thing. I'm not a pyro guy. I don't touch that stuff. I maybe one day, maybe sometimes I'll mix the audio, but I'm not lighting anything up. But again, thanks everybody. We'll see you all next week. And Chris, I'll hand it off to you.
Yep. So kind of going off what we were talking about with like the sports channels and we were talking about like most of the stations, they don't even broadcast at 1080p. How many actually do you feel like that we know of actually broadcast at 1080p? I mean, you're talking ESPN, which is one of the bigger stations for all things in just sports, doesn't even broadcast at 1080p. And everybody like loses their mind when they go and get cable and it's like, I need 1080p, and it's like, you're not getting it anyway.
I think it comes down to, like everybody has their process, but I don't, honestly, I paid close attention to see what comes in as 1080p. I'm actually a cord cutter, so I watch off of AT&T now through my Apple TV, so everything I'm watching is crap anyway. Even more so now because of COVID, but as far as I would say crap, I'd say it's not the best in streaming. It's not the best. It's all streaming. So whenever I see a real broadcast, even our local broadcast, I'm like, oh wow, hey, that TV does look good. But I get so used to watching it as a stream, it's not quite as crystal clear as what I would be if it was on the broadcast.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know I watch. I know my family. I have live TV at the house just for simplification because the wife's not techie at all. So for her, it's easier to hit a guide button and find what she's watching on TV. For me, I watch Disney Plus, I watch Netflix, I watch Hulu, and they all have high def servers, and they tell you, hey, this is going to broadcast at 1080 or it's not going to broadcast at 1080. They tell you whether it's standard def or high definition. Then you even have to be careful on some of the ones that say they are high definition because Amazon is one of them. I've found out that Amazon says it's high definition, but it's only 720. And when you're renting a movie from Amazon or watching something on Amazon, some of those movies can be $10 or $14 or $20 for a high def versus the standard's only $2.99. And it's like, to me, 720 to 480, very depending on what you're watching, is very not huge in difference. If you're watching just like a sitcom at 480 versus 720, it's not a huge deal. But if you're watching like a hockey movie or something, yeah, you might spring the extra bucks to watch it at 720, But yeah, I mean, I get tied up into that too. That's why for me, it's more, what does your internet package offer me versus what does your TV package offer me? My cousin, prime example, my cousin's like, oh, he finally was able to get Comcast where he's at. We live out in the boondocks, so like, always been satellite and the lower end stuff, and Comcast finally reached him, so he went and got Comcast. He's like, oh, the guy said something about because we have the two 4K TVs, we should get 4K boxes. I'm like, don't even waste your money. Like, don't even waste the extra $20 a month for the boxes. Just get your regular boxes and be done with it. Just make sure they're, I just get the HD boxes, so that way when you're watching whatever you're watching, you're at least getting it what high def is, But yeah, it's sometimes it's not as, a lot of people, like I say, they get hung up over that 1080 or like Iris was saying, the big fight over interlace and progressive, things like that. And it's like, not as much. I mean, I remember, again, this is coming from a gamer standpoint, Xbox 360, you used to get the converter to the HDMI, or you use the component, and the component would give you 480i to 720i versus HDMI would give you 720, and it's like, well, what's the difference? Well, when you're playing a game and all of a sudden you see these scrolls coming across your screen when you're using component versus HDMI, you don't see it. It makes a huge difference. You know, and that's my experience with it. What have you guys experienced with? I want to, you know, like that interlace and progressive. What have you guys experienced with that? Where it's like, okay, I don't necessarily, obviously, sports. We've already talked about. You want progressive with sports. It's just that's just common knowledge. Progressive, fast-paced movement. You want the progressive, but what have you guys worked with it where it's like, hey, we're running interlace and you're trying, you know, it's like, no, you need progressive, or you're running progressive and it's like, you really don't need it.
We've definitely ran into it just in some of these Zoom events we've done. And they're like, so what resolution are you? Oh, we're all 1080. Which one? And they're like, oh, 1080i. Okay. And then it makes me sigh because I know Zoom, if I'm giving it full HD, or if I'm giving it a good signal, it should be 1080p. Now here's another one too. Throw another one at you. 1080p 2997. There's 1080p 5994. I live in 5994, real 1080p. And just because I want a higher frame rate, Omar mentioned something about that frame rate being an issue. It's not. The bigger issue is definitely more the progressive versus interlace. That to me makes a bigger difference. But I would rather have that 60 frames per second versus 30, for sure. So yes, I think in answer to your question, Bodie, is that it all matters, but it depends on what content you're looking at too. But if I'm going to be broadcasting or sending out content to 1080p based Zoom, I'm not going to push in 60 because it's pointless. It's going to try to dumb it down to 30. But 30 is fine for what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, we just had, and John, I'll get to you 1 second so you don't have to keep your hand up, but we just had that same instance where the switcher was stuck at 60 and they switched all the cameras to 60 and we were getting choppy in the stream, and I'm like, okay, well, put it back down to 2997. And they're like, what? Why? Because you're doing talking head. You're not doing, we're doing panelist discussions, artist interviews. You don't need anything higher than that. It's not gonna, you're not trying to grab anything at fast motion, fast pace for everybody to see that they need to keep up with. You know, so it's like you said, 30 FPS can be fantastic. Hell, I started on 30 FPS because my computer couldn't keep up with more than 30 FPS at the time, and it looked great. It looked better than some of the people that were pushing 60, but it's because I knew what I was doing in my OBS or in my streaming setup to be able to adjust it to make it look good. And some people, and that's the other conversation I've had with some people too. They're like, oh, you're pushing way less than I am and yours looks better. They're running interlace and I'm running progressive. I'm like, switch this, I promise it'll save your life. And they've never had a better response to their videos and stuff like that. But yeah, John, you were gonna add to that?
No, I was just gonna, I've got Jan here now. We talked about the grave years. During this discussion, I go back to when I was just glad to get NTSC color through an RCA cable at 3x4. So it's pretty amazing what we're getting right now. We're talking pretty subtle, but it is amazing how far we've come along in this digital age. Jan, welcome. Earlier tonight we were talking about making sure you have clean underwear and not getting hit by a bus, and that's when I thought I'd join, because I figured I could relate to that, because I always remember my grandmother telling me not to be hit by a bus. But talking
that's
about
exactly
hybrid,
why I joined this conversation. When I heard that, I said, "Oh, you're talking about me."
But hybrid, in a different life this weekend, I'm doing support, comm support for a motorcycle race at Laguna Seca. That's not going to be hybrid. But in many ways it is hybrid, because most of the crowd is really watching on TV, so it is interesting how that's going to work. But it's the first event at Laguna Seca, and I'm part of a group that, being an old ham radio operator, that does spectator support. So be interesting. It will be the first live event that I've been at, and I've been very active with our convention center doing remote events, and they're going to start their first hybrid event will be next month. So we live in interesting times.
Now, John, just a quick question. Have you been driving around the track in the car?
No, but on every one, once a month on Wednesday, you could ride the track on your bicycle, and I've done that.
Because I've noticed this is the first time I've ever seen your hair windblown. Every time I've ever seen it, every hair is in perfect place. But all kidding aside, I'm looking at the statistics right now, and the video statistics are jumping between 320, 180. Now I see it popped up to 1920 by 1080. But if you look at the pictures of everybody, everybody's picture is pretty clean. I guess it also depends on the size of the screen that you're viewing on it, I would guess. Wouldn't you say that, Jeff, is correct?
You are correct. Actually, I was experiencing a little less quality than I like to see. And so I have a big ultra-wide monitor here, so I stretched my window down because I was multitasking, as most of you are doing. So I had my window kind of small for Zoom, for the gallery, and that made my video going out and what I was watching both at a lower quality. And so whenever I bring my window back down to something that's 1920 by 1080 on this larger 4K screen, it allowed me to have a higher quality. So not only what I'm viewing from you, but also from what I'm sending out to. There's a lot of different factors there. CPU is one of those, and I'm actually hearing my CPU fan kick on and off quite a bit right now because I'm pushing a little bit more with the other things I have running. But it's CPU, RAM, and then also what you're viewing it on. So don't always watch in a small little screen. If you want a better quality, make it a little bit higher.
But in the Zoom world, we had some fun stuff this week with the NDI dropping. And to make some of that work, they increased the bandwidth available in Zoom rooms. So there are easier to get more pictures and more pixels in these events than just 2 weeks ago.
I'm just remembering when the transition started between analog and digital, and the first HD stations came out, and everything was big, everything was expensive, and then when the FCC took back the analog channels, everybody freaking out about conversion. It's just really funny where everything goes and where it is, and people are now saying, oh yeah, 4K, this, that, and the other thing. These are the same people who didn't know what HD was when HD happened.
Yeah, I mentioned maybe in the chat, and I don't know if you guys heard that or saw it, but the reality is that I had Netflix and I was paying for the higher quality Netflix, and one of my friends says that's a waste of money, so I dropped it down to SD, and literally only sometimes the blacks I notice are different, but what I definitely notice is a difference on anything, whatever's broadcast on this TV, which is the Q60 Samsung 85-inch, is the sound quality. The articulation is almost non-existent in anything that I get across. So does anybody have any ideas on that? On
In a soundbar, Samsung TVs are horrendous for their audio. Always have been, always will be.
Are you using just the TV for audio, or is it?
Of course not. I have a Bose system. I have two systems connected. I have a Bose system connected, and then I have a Playbase Sonos system connected with it, with two Sonos ones.
Hey, well, got to think of it as bitrate schemes. That the bitrate of a lower quality, so the audio is going to be probably going to be a crushed down part too. Not just the video bitrate, but the audio is also going to be crushed down, so that they're trying to fit in that smaller hole. So your SD quality might be also affecting your audio side too. I have a three-way or a 5.1 sound system that's all embedded in the wall and everything, so recessed speakers, and that was a major thing I had to do for my Samsung, was because the speakers on it are useless. But it sounds like you got the right speakers. But you might check that, Jan, and just see if there's a quality difference between the SD and quote what they're calling SD, and then also the HD version too.
Well, it's not just. I'm not talking about Netflix. I'm talking about everything from broadcast television all the way through to Amazon Prime or the Roku box, the Apple TV. It just seems the articulation that they're sending through these days is just not high quality.
I would agree with that. They need more Andys.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have actually a really good question that came from Raymond Sweet. He said, sorry I'm late. I went to go purchase a MiFi the other day, and the dude said that 5G is not in enough places to get a 5G MiFi. What are your thoughts about using those types of things to broadcast from remote places at the highest quality, or is that a totally different subject? I was expecting you to throw your hand up on that one, Jeff.
Having done a lot of that, it, probably a lot of us call it the MiFi also, Bodie, but that's just kind of like it's been one of those little pug things, and whether it's the Netgear version or the others that are out there, I personally have found that we can get by with LTE just as easy, and it is true that there's not enough 5G out there. But if you are looking at doing this a lot and you need more stability, then go with a LiveView Solo at the minimum, because a LiveView Solo allows you to bond multiple devices, so multiple LTEs or multiple 5Gs together, and that will give you a much stronger and more reliable stream. If it's something that's not a high big budget, then yeah, use a MoFi or a MiFi. MoFi is is the modem that we use of choice, and we can put any SIM in if we want to. But we found that that works really well, and we can get by with a basic stream, say like a 5,000, 6,000 kilobit per second stream out of a typical LTE, unless it's a really congested area. That's where the live views come into play. So whether it's live view, TVU, or any of the other bonded cellular type solutions, then that is definitely a great way. I mean, we're doing live view LU800s, which are their top of the line. It's a 4-input system, and it has 8 modems in it. So it's bonding multiple carriers and multiple modems per carrier. So with that, I can push a 15 megabit stream. Now I chew through a lot of data at that point, but it's all part of the billing as we figure it out. We bill it back to the client for that cost also.
Yeah, he did say it's a simple event, single band outside small space just for a Facebook Live. It's nothing huge, so it's not like he needs to power an entire truck. So you should be able to get away with the MiFi. You're right, it is MiFi, not MiFi. I don't know why I said MiFi. I just looked at it and read it that way. But you should be able to get away with it. Most of the 5G stuff still scales down to 4G, even though the LTE, even though it's rated as a 5G. Most of them do. Now, there are some of them out there that are limited only for whatever reason. I don't even know why they've made them personally, but they're just 5G. They don't scale. And it is a LiveView Solo that he's talking about. I see a couple things going through chat. We actually did a show on that. He actually did a show. Jeff Keithley himself did a show on the LiveView Solo. I want to say it was, our 5th or 6th episode?
That actually was the bigger boy. That's the one I just grabbed from behind me. I keep it by my desk. It's always some people love it. And I do too. This unit, this is the LU800. So this is the bigger guy. And so 4 inputs, or you can run it as a single input. Sorry, I'm blocking my mic. You can run it as a single input, a 2 input, or 4 inputs. And then I do the mixing back either here at the MCR or I do the mixing in the cloud, which is most of the time. But the major part of this is, of course, the cellular side. But honestly, we use the cellular a bit, but the majority of ours is just using the line and the cellular as backup. So that's a big part of our workflow. But if you need to be 100% cellular, then by all means, the LiveView products are fantastic. And if you need me to introduce you to somebody, just hit me up on Discord. I've got a great sales network with my reps and stuff, and they always take care of us at LiveView. So
speaking of LiveView, me and Omar ran across something that actually looks pretty good and promising. Have you ever heard of the YOLO Lives?
Yes.
Thoughts?
It may fit the needs for some people. Not me.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the bonded line. You only can have one SD, one network card in it. It does do redundancy backup, so you can't have your main network into it and then have the SIM as a backup on it and things like that. But there's no bonding, so it kind of takes some of the steam away from it on that end. There's some cool features about it. We've been playing with one, and there's some cool features to it, but definitely highly recommend, obviously, the LiveView Solo for LiveView Solo, or like he just showed, the bigger one, for anything big or major that you're doing, it's more reliable, obviously, because it's been tested and put through its trenches. But the MiFi boxes, they'll handle pretty good for small events like that. I've used my phone as a hotspot to do some IRL stuff back to Twitch, and it handles it perfectly fine. And I'm in Orlando, and it's congested. So, traffic, internet traffic and mobile traffic is way congested. So you can get away with that too. Just like you said, it just depends on how much you're pushing, where you're pushing from, things like that.
And I think it depends also on, are you getting paid to do it? If you're getting paid to do it and you're relying on a single connection, make sure the client is well aware of it and that you have them sign off on it. It's like, yes, I can do this and I can do it at this rate. Here are the possibilities of what may or may not go right. And so that way you can make sure that you're definitely giving them the expectations and managing those expectations. If it's and they'll always come back to us, well, no, it's really important. Johnny's little bar mitzvah, we have to have that live. That has to be. So whatever it takes, but we don't want to pay $1 more than what you gave us a quote for. But that's always going to be the answer to anybody. They're like, no, it's the most important thing in the world. But whenever you say, okay, well, it's going to be $3,000 to rent a live view at LU800 for the week, it just is what it is. And sometimes they will come back. I've had them do that. Fairly large shows in the last year are like, well, we have fiber. It's like, well, what happens when it goes down? And it did. That $3,000 they paid as that insurance policy allowed them to feed out to over 100,000 people. So it made sense at that point. But it's hard when you're just writing the checks and figuring out the numbers. Is it really viable at that point to make it work? To me, every truck I have has a live view in it. Absolutely.
A bar mitzvah with 100,000 viewers?
It wasn't a bar mitzvah. That was
So
I have worked for bar mitzvahs that spent that much, though. So that's the crazy part. Back in the day.
I heard Spielberg's bar mitzvah had that many people viewing it. But I got a question for you. 5K fact or fiction? I mean, because I can't see any difference between my phone now says 5K. I'm here in Vegas. I don't see any difference in speed or any quality or anything like that. Is there really anything different right now at 5K, or is it what's going to be?
On 5G versus LTE, there is a difference if you're in a true zone for 5G. So right now, like for instance, where I live currently in Naples is a true 5G hub. And because there's not a lot of users on it, you can see an extreme difference in the LTE versus 5G. But when you go down to places like Miami or in Orlando or in Tampa, where they're very congested, you're going to see your usage is going to vary, is the best way to put it. And it's based on how many people are accessing stuff at the same time. Sorry about the noise in the background. So it definitely does change based on where you're at.
My phone's been saying 5G. Was it actually say something else? Well, I don't even actually have service in my building right now, so I have to be on the Wi-Fi. But my AT&T has said 5G for almost a year or more, I guess. But I don't see any differences in speed. Not hardly any.
Me neither. I just don't understand it. I mean, they're saying it's fast as can be. T-Mobile is saying that they got now Sprint, so that it's going to be the craziest thing in the world and so fast. And yet, I don't see any difference at all whatsoever. As a matter of fact, when I was in Miami, Bodie, the service was horrible. I felt like I was like on 2G or 1G or with no Gs.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And that's why I'm saying it depends on the area that you're in and the congestion of the traffic that you're receiving. So 4G, just real quick to kind of, because we are done for the night, we do have a question from Jeremy Horn, and I highly recommend joining Discord and getting with Jeff on that. He wants to know what is required on the receiving end of a live
solo. That's easy.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's
RTMP.
Yeah, it's the RTMP.
It's going to send out an RTMP through the LRT interface if you buy into the LRT package, which is actually another step up to do the bonding. But yeah, it'll send out as RTMP out to whatever destination you want to. It's a smaller version of the LU Central or the Live U Central than what we use for our bigger events.
Yeah, but real quick to wrap it up on the 5G versus 4G. In Naples, LTE doing true speed test on 4G, I was getting 350 up in probably around 35 to 40, or 350 down, 35 to 40 up, and on 5G, I'm getting almost 600 down and roughly around 75 to 100 up now on 5G. So I'm getting quite a bit of difference where I am. But again, I'm in Naples. Anybody who knows anything about Naples, it's old people central. Everybody over 80 years old, they go there to retire, and that's about it. 95% of those people don't even know how to use their phone properly. And you're talking about a tech guy like me who literally has every functionality possible in the world. You can ask my brother, he's been to my house, he's seen everything I have. That it's like I literally push the boundaries on what I'm even offered where I live. So I need to get to a tech hub in order to be better service. But I mean, I don't even have fiber where I'm at yet. Fiber's barely just coming in where I am. But guys, this has been awesome. I'm so happy to be part of such a great community of people in Iris and Jeff and Justin and Andrew, Angela, Jay, and John. Everybody. We like Ed said before he left, we started this not knowing where it's going to go, what it was going to do, just to keep in touch with each other, just to keep going and teaching everybody about things that are going to, that you're going to want to learn, that you're going to want to use. And, we really came in hard and heavy at the beginning with a lot of the streaming service stuff with OBS and vMix, and Jeff came in and did the live use solos, and Justin came in and did stream deck switching, and so did Ian and things like that. So we've had such a great year in AV Tech Talks and AV Educate, and we want to keep this going forward, and we're going to make sure that no matter how busy we stay, how busy we keep, which we hope everybody can get out there and get going, and live stuff's coming back, and we see it coming and we see it happening. I don't see virtual or hybrid going away either, so just keep your skills sharpened, and everything you can to keep going. Anything else you guys want to add on to that before we head out? Nope. All right, guys, it's been great. We will be back next Monday. Omar had a little bit of audio issues going on his end, but we'll get it all figured out for next week for sure. I might have to drive down there and help him with some of this stuff. I think personally it was a vMix issue, but we'll figure it out from there. We'll be back with Ed and his place, and thank you guys so much for being here, supporting our cause, being here, supporting us as a community. Have a great night. See you next week.